Addicted to creating. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of Addicted to Creating. I am extremely pleased today to do some nepotism. And it isn't a celebrity, it's my cousin that I've got on the call. And this is not a Barry Hilton cousin. This is like actually my cousin that I have on the call. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce all the listeners to Addicted to Creating to Segrin Nair, who is the director of Classy Pet Care. And we're going to be talking to him today about his passion, which is dogs and animals, and what inspired him to start his business, and dogs and everything around it, life and his inspirations and his passions. So Segrin, Kazi, welcome to Addicted to Creating.
Thank you very much, Sudan. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And first, let me just start by saying you are the most organized guest we've had on the show. Geez, you are outdoing me because you are. I'm the one who should be interviewed, and you look like the guy who's the interviewer.
When you're involved with animals, you got to be one step above, above the pack.
No, excellent. It's good to see you. So, firstly, how are you doing, man?
Great. I'm absolutely happy.
What you been involved with the last few days? What's been keeping you busy?
Well, we're in the midst of a training session. As you know, I take in dogs for training.
Yeah.
So it's been intensive work in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And and that's basically the business keeping me very, very, very with my hands full here.
So I'm going to jump straight into it. And it's something that I don't think I unpacked with all our family occasions when we meet. And tell us, what was the defining moment when you said, you know what, I'm done with teaching and I'm making this move to what you're doing now? What was it?
It was quite simple, because I think when I was in that position where I realized that I've had enough of being in the mainstream of education, and having been in senior management roles and seen the difficulties and the challenges that were existing at that time, and were going to continue for years to come, I realized that I need to be in a happier place where I could bring about a further contribution to society, so to speak. And
so just to interrupt, sorry to interrupt. So when you were, I'm trying to recall, when you left school, were you head of department, vice principal? I can't recall now. What sort of position were you holding at the time?
I was school principal.
Okay.
At
which school?
School principal at Durban Heights in Reservoir Hills. That's,
yes, up yes. The road from where we were.
Yes.
Okay.
So I was at that time the youngest principal in the region, and I was asked, why is it that I want to bow out? But the choice was very, very clear. I think if I had stayed in a situation that was becoming toxic, my well-being would have been affected. My role as a human being in the society would have been diluted big time, because there were various factors that saw a downward trend in education, and we are seeing it manifesting in a big way right now. Yeah. But at that time, I saw a downward slippery slide going on.
Okay.
And the question was simple: what would I like to do with the rest of my life? I could either remain there and continue to climb, because I had years ahead of me, having entered a management position quite early, and the most senior one, or could I do something that brings more joy?
Yeah.
And the choice was simply to choose something that I'm passionate about, because I was always told that if you do something that you love, you don't work anymore.
Yes.
And surely that was the most appealing thing to anybody.
So
Yeah.
I'm keen to know, Segrin, when you were growing up, obviously there were a lot of things that um, influenced you to harness this passion for dogs. What were some of the key milestones that got you to this passion with dogs? I mean, I can't recall. I mean, you all had dogs when you were much younger. When did it all start?
Um, it it started as a child because we've always had dogs. I cannot recall a moment without having many dogs in our family. And of course, they were pets, they were not guards. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was very passionate about dogs as well. And he actually trained dogs to do the most interesting things, like carrying his bags from the local shop, accompanying him to marketplaces and so on. And the dogs would be in absolute control.
Wow.
And this kind of stories were told to us by my mom and my granny, and it inspired me to imagine interacting with another being like that, apart from a human being. It
Wow.
was absolutely intriguing.
Yeah.
So I think I moved from just a pet lover to dog sport at a time when uh, there was a security threat in our area, and my mom asked us to get a guard dog. And when you get a dog with that type of potential, it means you've got to unfold all its pure potential in terms of training and so on.
Yeah.
And I became involved with the dog club. And after a few years, I was recognized as somebody that the rest of the members would love to work with. And I was sent for training to become a trainer and a handler. I then entered competitions throughout the country. I even represented South Africa in 1996 in Zimbabwe. Um, and my success there also spurred me on. It was a historic moment in terms of race and in terms of color and everything. In Zimbabwe, the international competition saw a man from Scotland come first, um, an African Zimbabwean come second, and myself, an Indian South African, come third. So it really put me on the map, and my competition skills became further honed, and I simply became passionate about training dogs for pleasure. So that's how it all started.
So, what is the state of this discipline globally? I know you said that in that competition you came out third. You know,
Mhm.
if you were to look at what's available in South Africa, the skill level of the people that are involved in all of these organizations, what would you say? How do we compare uh, to the best that's out there globally?
Well, I think our entry point into the dog sport has been relatively late. Dog sport in this country on a serious level is less than 40 years old. And believe me, 40 years in Europe uh, is, is, is hugely meaningful, because in Europe, dog sport has been going on for many decades.
Yeah.
And the standards are extremely high. The world standards as well, even America, is extremely high. But in South Africa, we have had the opportunity of bringing in experts in their fields, and we've had many, many seminars. I am currently the vice chairman of a dog club that's involved with working competitions.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm still active on that level. And so we do bring in people to conduct seminars, and we attend courses and so on to keep up to date. So the standard in South Africa is now, I would say, relatively high. But in terms of world standards, we are still maybe at least 10 years behind, in my opinion. But there have been many who have achieved great things on the South African handling aspects in competition. So the
Okay.
potential is high. And secondly, we've had the benefit of importing some very, very good breeds and bloodlines for working, uh, training potential, and things like a dog's spirit has to be honed and bred So we have had the pleasure of bringing such dogs into this country. And I've owned one such dog, and I'm now going to be involved in another puppy soon. Hopefully, that it will take me to that level, but it will take a few years.
So, in terms of the breeds that you are quite passionate about, I know just historically German Shepherds are amongst those that you're very passionate about. Um, Tell us a little bit more about those specific breeds that that really fascinate you.
I'm fascinated by all working breeds, and that's not just related to guard dogs. I think any working dog exudes a type of intelligence and passion to please its handler, and that inspires me a great deal. I have historically only worked with German Shepherds, but at the moment I have a Belgian Malinois, which in my experience, is probably the most intelligent breed that I've worked with. I don't want my German Shepherd compatriots to hear that. I'm very passionate about German Shepherds as well. But the Belgian Malinois is in a class of its own, and it's my third one. I owned the first one about 25 years ago, when they were first introduced into this country, and now I have another one, which I'm working. Unfortunately, she came from a difficult background, and I actually rescued her. So it's a bit of a challenge to get her to the level that I want in the time frame that I want. But that is my goal, and I'll be doing so. Um, there are various other shepherd breeds, like border collies. There are other hunting breeds and hunting hounds, which will truly impress you. So I guess it's purely a matter of personal choice.
Yes.
And just as you get different people with different tastes, we must respect their love for their own breed. And they are all beautiful. There are different other aspects of my business that works with all breeds and
Yep.
crossbreeds. I even own an indigenous breed, an Africanus, which is also super bright. Um, and I've owned her for about 8 years now. So in terms of breed, I'm not, how can I say, uh,
Not biased towards one particular.
not biased towards one. It's
Yeah.
just that I prefer at this point a Belgian Malinois or a German Shepherd. That's simply a personal choice because I
Okay.
find it quite challenging.
So I think I told you a couple months ago that we finally got a dog for our home. You know, we were never dog people.
Yes.
And compared to the rest of the siblings, it's just David and myself that have dogs. David was the first one. Let's put it out there.
Yep.
And for me, I married Lynette, who has always been very, very close to dogs. And you see what happens.
Yes. That's called evolution. I'm glad that the family is evolving, and thank you to Lynette for that. But you haven't quite hit it, because your other sibling Mahendri also has a dog,
Oh,
and
yes, of course.
yes, I've
Of
had the
course.
pleasure of taking care of her dog when she goes off on holiday.
Yes.
So yeah, and that dog too has changed her life,
Yes.
like how your new one has changed yours. So the
Yes.
impact that a dog has on the family
Yeah.
is something that you can't put your finger on.
Yes. Yes.
It's
And
profound.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
I am, I have a story around during COVID when it kicked off, and I would be working from home, and Bubblegum, Yorkshire Terrier. So it was just Bubblegum and myself at home. So the normal situation is I'd be on calls like this, talking to my clients or my colleagues, and Bubblegum would just come up onto the table and walk across, go onto the keyboards, mute and unmute. And it was it really broke the the tension and the formalness to everything.
Yes.
And so much
Uh,
so now, now that I've got, like, I would say, a better home office, because we all started with doing this with the laptop on our beds and cereal next to us, and trying to not put the camera on while we're still wearing pajamas. But after we kind of evolved into the COVID situation and I managed to get my proper workstation, he now comes up to me and I've got to put a chair next to me. So he now sits next to me while I'm on a call. And he makes it known if he needs to leave, then if he wants me to carry him, then I've got to carry him. So it was,
Well,
like you said, it's a totally evolution for me. I never thought I'd.
yes. It's a misconception, and our egos are to blame for this. We believe that we own dogs, but in actual fact, they own us.
Yeah,
When they come into our life, they take complete control of our emotions, our passions, our desire to be joyful.
yes,
They fix us when we are low. They are simply in command of our lives. And I
absolutely.
think all we can do in tribute to these wonderful beings is to just simply give them everything of the best in every respect.
Tell
Yeah.
me the business in its current format. There's
Mhm.
obviously different aspects to it. What are some of the core operations you guys do, and what are some of the new things that you're probably venturing to? Maybe you want to just for everyone's benefit.
Yes. We have the different divisions. We do dog grooming, which means the physical care of the dogs, the shampooing, the washing, and the professional clipping and so on of them. We also transport dogs locally to our clients' vets, or if they're moving house and so on. Then we have a kennel facility where we take in dogs for overnight stays and boarding. So either short term over the overnight or over weekends, and even long term for many months. We've kept dogs here for a few years, believe it or not,
Wow.
where yes, where owners had gone off on work holidays overseas, or in one case, a family was building a mansion of a property and needed to house the dog with us for 2 years. So that's one of the things we do as well. And then, of course, there's the training division where we take in dogs for training from all over the country, and we do basic obedience training and basic guarding training for homes, and to a smaller scale for security companies.
Yes.
And then we are going to be venturing into doggy products and other pet products that we will be selling mostly online. And that's a division that my son Divin is working on at the moment.
Okay.
And moving forward, we hope to actually start manufacturing our own pet products like certain dog food and so on a long-term plan. So that's basically what we do at this point in time.
Okay. Wonderful. So
Then on
outside.
a private level, I'm involved with dogs on a competition level. That's purely a hobby,
Yeah.
and that's something I continue to pursue. But that's for my own happiness. Yeah.
So when Segren has a weekend away outside of the busy life of an entrepreneur, a small business owner, what what is your way to recharge those batteries so that you can face the next quarter or the next 6 months? What is your what
I
is
think
your what is the word that I'm looking for? I wouldn't say poison because then that's delving down to a area we don't want to go to, eh?
all right.
Yeah. How do you
You can
recharge those
actually take
batteries?
the only thing that recharges me is going into the bush.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about nature, and uh, I go off on weekend hikes and weekend stays that would be generally in the mountains or in the bush. But I have a family that also loves the sea. So I spend maybe a little bit of time, but my first choice would be off to the bush. I go off into my preferred nature reserve, which is the Kruger National Park in Mpumalanga.
Yeah.
And I'm there sometimes about 3 to 4 times a year, depending on the extra funds that I've got, which I just direct into just having fun in the bush. So I've always had a 4x4, and that has helped me. And recently, I'm getting deeper into photography, namely wildlife and nature photography. I've purchased some interesting equipment as a reward to myself, and I'm really into that. So that's my passion. And when I come back uh, from the bush, I plan my next trip to the bush. So that's my life. I work with animals, I live with animals, I relax with animals. That's basically it.
That's awesome. So I have like scratched the surface when it comes to Kruger. So the first trip
Hmm.
we did as a family was about 4 years ago, and then
Hmm.
last year sometime we went for our second trip. And the first trip, I think we saw four out of the big five. We were actually fortunate within the first 15 minutes of entering any gate ever in Kruger National, we spotted a leopard, and
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
generally operate solo at
Hmm.
that time of the day, and it was awesome. To date, we still didn't see lions even in the second trip. Uh, for Kruger National, what are some of the experiences that stand out for you over the years that you've been there?
Oh man, we need another hour for that. I can honestly tell you that.
Yeah.
I go. I've just come back actually from a trip there, and the Big Five is something that you'd like to tick off your list. And that's what happened to me initially when I started going into game reserves, chasing the
Yes.
Big Five. Um, but it's no longer something that actually means a great deal to me. And by so doing and surrendering that desperation to see the Big Five, you actually end up seeing the Big Five more easily. I don't know how the power of attraction works, but when you relax and
Yes.
you're totally at ease, that's when things happen for you in your life. When you don't desperately want it. But having said that about the Big Five, it's always a joy to see that. Um, and then you start looking for the smaller things. There's also, the little five and the ugly five and so on. These are all things that they have lists for. But I'm so involved in even admiring these expensive vistas and the landscape and the grasses. There's such a variety of grasses in Kruger. There's such a wonderful variety of trees and other plant life. And when you go in there, the bird life is prolific. There's about 500 species of birds at least there. And I haven't ticked all of them off, not even half of them, because I haven't been a passionate or avid birder yet. And then the sounds of the Kruger, the smells. When you go in there and you just drive around with your window open, you want to bottle that smell and take it back home because nothing is polluted in the Kruger. It's all natural and pure. And when you get back to camp and you relax around the fire and just turn your eyes up to the sky, you'll find you can actually reach out and grab one of those stars because that's how clear the sky night sky is. And there's also no light pollution. And of course, there are certain regulations when you are in a game reserve of that kind. For example, keeping noise levels down and your general conduct, which you've got to be courteous to your fellow travelers and your fellow tourists. But that brings about another kind of tranquility and peace just listening to the night sounds and the morning chorus. When you look at and experience all these things, you wonder why you were chasing just the big five.
Yes.
It's not just the only thing that would actually interest you anymore. But however, having said that, when you go to the Kruger, even if you meet days where you might not see something, uh, the further you travel, the more you are likely to see and encounter. So I've had the pleasure of traveling the length and breadth of Kruger. I think I've stayed in every major camp from upper north, meeting the Zimbabwean border, right to the most southerly Crocodile Bridge area. And it's just simply a wonderful experience. So yes, we've had, among the things that stand out for me are the wilderness trails that I've been on, where you gain access to areas that the normal public doesn't have access to, that the usual ordinary tourists don't go to, are not allowed to. You've got to pay a hefty fee for a weekend going into these places, and they are deep in the bush. There's no cell phone signal. There's no electricity. There's just a generator for so many hours in the day, and then you go on hikes, and each hike is about 3 hours. You go for about two hikes like that a day, 3 to 4 hours. Then you come back, you relax, or you sit around the campfire and talk about the day's events. And those were some of the most memorable experiences that I've had deep in the bush. So it's something that I've been doing for the last 22 years, and I can go tomorrow if I get a chance again.
It's wonderful. And I was just thinking about some of the experiences now that we had in the last trip, and it's so true what you say. The first thing, the temptation is there to say, let's just see the big five, and you start knocking it off, and you drive, and you're almost, like a typical Gautenger. It's like, oh, turn the car around, let's just go down. No, this is not working out. And then you start forgetting about all the nice things that are along the way.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
And,
I
and
also kind of made my peace with that. And the last trip, we saw so many elephant, um, and it was so weird because we paused during one of our trips. I think the kids wanted to get some food from the back, or they wanted to change, and lo and behold, this young elephant comes out into our path onto the road, and we obviously do the obvious, and we reverse to give it some space and to not be threatening in any way. And this guy was clearly not having a good day, so we're wondering what's happening. He was shaking his head, and
yeah,
it was actually quite funny, because then we looked into the bush, and he was basically having a fight with another young elephant.
yeah,
So he came out, he was not happy, he went back into the bush, they fought a bit, they kind of brought it onto the road, like a couple of gangsters. Then they went back into the bush, and then when it was safe enough, we drove past, and it was like, oh my God, what did
yes,
we just witness there? And it's those little moments that are so awesome. You'll never get it. The one thing I do want to say, though, is after the very first trip in Kruger, we almost took a vow to ourselves never to go to a zoo again.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
We just couldn't
yeah,
bring ourselves to go and see animals in an enclosed environment,
yes,
especially some of these larger animals that thrive on the space and the
yes.
vegetation. Well,
Mm-hmm.
what's your thoughts on that? I mean, what is the happy balance with zoos and you know leaving them in their natural environment?
Um, if you are an animal activist, there is no happy balance. There should not be places like this, in my opinion. It's my humble opinion, because that is for the entertainment of people who do not quite grasp the well-being of an animal. Because here you have something in an exhibition for your pleasure, which is momentary. Maybe it would last half an hour, and off you go to the next thing that you want to see in your life. And this animal has to be kept in conditions which are unforgivable, because even if there are zoos with high standards of care, they cannot replicate the joy that animal will have in its own environment. Its search for food, its interaction with other species, its enjoyment of the climate, its freedom to procreate, its stimulation of just being an animal, that it was meant to be. But here it is out here prancing basically exhibiting itself for the pleasure of mankind. And I think that's unforgivable. It's something that I will never endorse. And I hope that as people, we make our mark, our statement on that type of thing and move away from that. If you want to see a beautiful animal that you are intrigued by, get a picture of it, or watch it on TV or some other type of media. But it's a terrible sin. And then of course that goes even further and deteriorates into training of animals, for example, for circuses and for other activities like, for example, elephant back rides, which is actually quite terrible because these animals have no choice. Many of them are trained by very cruel and painful means. And of course, even people train dogs like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's something I've never subscribed to, and always seen the value of training an animal and unfolding its natural potential, but rewarding it the way that it should be rewarded, that it wants to be rewarded with love and joy and whatever. But yeah, you get animals in confined areas like zoos and circuses and so on, and it's cruelty no matter how you package it, no matter which way you slice it. You could say that they are being well fed, that their longevity is expanded because animals in captivity do live longer. But do you really want to live longer but not in a fulfilled manner? I don't think you choose to do that even as a human being. So you would not get me endorsing that at all.
Well, what have
And if there's
you
anything I can do, yeah, against that, I would join such a movement.
what have you researched about in terms of countries that try to expose their citizens to animals in their natural environment? I mean, is there a model uh, that South Africa can aspire to, or many countries can aspire to ensure, for example, kids have, let's just call it access. When I say access, not in a zoo, I mean, I would imagine the natural thing would be is to kind of subsidize trips into Kruger National, right? And find ways in which you can do it that's obviously environmentally friendly. Well, if you were given the task, how would you approach it?
Education would be the first step, and I think the South African national parks would rate very, very high in terms of the efforts that they are putting in this regard, and also their general contribution to environmental awareness and conservation and protection of species ranks among the highest in the world. So Kruger National Park is one of the uh, satellites of the South African national parks. There are many other parks like that throughout our country. And in terms of research, in terms of conservation, in terms of protection, in terms of saving species that are endangered, uh, fighting criminal activity like wanton poaching and so on, uh, the Kruger rates very high and has developed a very good reputation. In fact, sandparks in general. Having said that, you would get the odd one art who would go against the ethos of that organization uh, and get involved with criminal activity like poaching,
Hmm.
which occurs at the highest levels. You would get poaching being conducted or planned and so on by people in very, very high levels of conservation. It's very sad.
Yeah.
There have been rangers that have been caught. There have been veterinarians in the park who have been caught doing that, possibly politicians and other. It's $1 million industry. So where there's money of this nature, it's going to be very difficult to combat it. But having said that, a great deal should go into education. I know there are previously disadvantaged communities surrounding the Kruger, for example, where they are being encouraged to come in and bring in children to experience animals. Can you believe the sadness of the fact that many children who were born in Africa haven't seen certain iconic African animals? Many of them have never even seen an African elephant or any of the big five. Uh, they would be in awe if they see a giraffe or any antelope because they haven't had the opportunity of doing that. Of course, you know, our country comes from a very sad and ugly past,
Yeah.
which has prevented uh, the masses from enjoying these resources in our country. It was actually reserved for a certain group of people, and that's slowly changing. If you go into the Kruger over the last at least 5 years, the the demographics of the tourists have changed. We
Yes.
see so many people of color, so many Africans, so many Asians coming in um, and enjoying themselves. Absolutely becoming passionate like this. So
Yeah.
it's there for everybody. And I would, yes, start with education, start with the joy of seeing these animals in the natural environment, getting involved with activities like conservation and so on, and making the time and effort to visit these places in like these game reserves and nature conservation areas. That's what has to happen.
So getting back to dogs,
Mhm.
I think when we were deciding what breed to get, we looked at our circumstances at home. We never had a very large yard. Space is always a challenge up here in Gauteng. We don't have the luxury of the large pieces of backyard we had back in our family homes in Durban. So, Yorkie was a good choice for us. And with two kids, um, it was ideal. And Yorkies are extremely protective breed, as you probably know. Let's talk about when people decide to pick a specific breed for their home. Now, there's always these horror stories about, yeah, look, somebody decided to have a pit bull at home. By all means, they thought this was going to work out, and there's a horror story that followed, right? What, from your experience and from speaking to experts and being pretty much an expert yourself in the field, how do we do this better? Obviously education is one aspect of it, and there's like you said, there's the ego aspect, right? A lot of people sometimes will say, look, I want to get a kick-ass breed that's in my home, and they may not have the resources, they may not have the skills, or temperament to actually accommodate that dog in their homes. What is the best approach?
I think that's a beautiful question, and I'm proud of you for having considered all those factors when you were selecting your dog. A Yorkie,
I've done good with
Yorkshire
you,
Terrier,
Sege. I've done
you've
good
done
with you.
good. Yep, I think you're going to get invited home now. The Yorkshire Terrier, Yorkie, as you say, has been the most popular breed in this country for almost a decade.
Is it? I didn't
And
know
I
that.
think, yes, it
Oh,
has. And the unfortunate thing is when a dog becomes so popular, it becomes overbred and it becomes the flavor of the month, and everybody wants to breed them in the backyard. Everybody wants to own one, and not everybody can cope with one. So this is the kind of spin-off you get whenever you watch a movie that features a specific breed. For example, after 101 Dalmatians, everybody wanted a Dalmatian. When everybody's watching these YouTube videos on the Belgian Malinois, we're seeing a flood of them wanting this dog. And then we see a whole lot of them in kennels and in rescue places where they can't be handled and they are sitting there because nobody can handle them anymore. Similarly, with power breeds like pit bulls, and there are, a range of exotic dogs that can come in here because they have a certain image. So first step is to take a step backwards and ask yourself why you want this dog. If it is purely driven by something as shallow as ego or style or fashion, you should just get a picture of that dog. All right. And not go any further than that. By the way, the size is also not a simple factor to choose. It's not about, the size of the dog in a fight. It's the size of the fight in a dog. So you could get a little Yorkie or a Jack Russell that'll take on a pit bull or take on a German Shepherd and believe it can win. And the first thing you should consider when you are purchasing a pet of this kind is to consider what that dog was bred for. If that dog was bred for a certain utility purpose, for example, if it was bred for fighting other dogs, or if it was bred for herding domesticated animals like sheepdogs, or if it was bred for hunting certain dogs, certain things like birds, or if it was bred for guarding, or if it was bred for covering large areas, like the Pyrenean mountain dogs and various other mountain dogs and so on. You must ask yourself what the dog was bred for. Because if you buy such a dog because it looks exotic and you put it in an inappropriate environment, it's going to rebel. So, as you quite rightly pointed out, if you get a dog that's used to wandering and covering large areas and you stick it in a backyard, it's going to get destructive. It's going to get frustrated. It's going to get noisy. It's going to become a pain in the butt to own. And it will do all things that are uncharacteristic of its own breed. I don't believe a person should just get a dog like that. Of course, this is a whole story that people get dogs that look like them, but I don't think after a while when you look at a certain dog and a certain owner, it's the owner's physique that starts copying the dog. It's not the other way around. So anyway, what should come from the owner that would copy the dog is a passion that would fit that dog's temperament. So if you are a person with a lively kind of lifestyle, you're involved with fitness activities and so on, by all means, get a dog that has that type of energy level. If you're a couch potato, get a dog that would match that type of lifestyle. Then there are no issues. It just fits into the pack, like the way a child would fit into a family, because a child would enter a family and merge with the values and merge with the activity levels and then all the things that interest that family. So you can't bring in, let's just say, for example, a power breed like a pit bull and keep him in your bedroom and mollycoddle him. And then when his natural instincts take over and he bites somebody or threatens somebody, you're in trouble. We've seen so many of this type of thing happening, and unfortunately, they become glamorized in certain shows. Regarding pit bulls, for example, there is a trainer on a regular trainer on National Geographic who idolizes pit bulls and promotes, in a way, pit bulls because he believes that this dog is just like any other breed. It just has to be treated well and it'll be good. But that's not the case. A dog has certain natural urges and certain natural instincts that inform the way it behaves. It is absolutely natural. It doesn't have anything to do with training.
Yeah.
So consider that. Consider that. Certain dogs, they must match your lifestyle and they must match the purpose in which you've got it. Then, having said that, you must get involved with unfolding all the other aspects and contributing to that dog's well-being. Its physical needs, its mental stimulation, its emotional needs, everything. And then you have a happy relationship.
Wonderful. That's such good advice. Segran, thank you so much for that. So, as we wind down this hour, we've got a couple minutes left. What are you listening to? I'm a music person. So, I know you're sitting in the Kruger. I know the noise levels need to be okay, You got to watch the
Mm.
levels you put your music on. But when you're in the car and when you're in your quiet spaces, what are you listening to these days?
I'm a very predictable person.
What?
So uh, I love classical music. It's simple as that. I just simply love classical music, and it's not restricted to any ethnic classical music.
Any
I
classical
love
music.
any classical music.
Wow.
Um, my upbringing has been one of uh, Eastern culture. And so I've always delved in and been surrounded by people who were involved with Indian classical music, and it's something that I love. I also support those efforts among people that I know who are involved with developing the arts, among Indian music. Carnatic music being one of my favorites. But I simply love other classical music. And that would go deep into vocal classical music and instrumental classical music from the West as well, or from other Eastern regions of the world. I simply love classical music. That's one. The second thing I love is jazz. And the saxophone is one of my favorite things. I've resolved to play the saxophone before I show more
Awesome.
gray hairs, and hopefully, cuz I'll play for you in a couple years' time. But I've got to
Yes.
first get started on that road. I
Right.
love it, and then I'm easy. My sons love their own kind of music, which is more contemporary, and I enjoy it as well, except the rubbish that comes up and that I see where there's use of filthy language and filthy images in music. It's unacceptable, really. I can't see how anybody can gain serenity from music if that is what you call harmony and rhythm and beauty and in anything, whether it's just the lyrics or anything that cannot be music. So I love even contemporary music if it's clean. Um, and
Now, one
yeah.
very, very important question. You're sitting there in your comfortable studio with a kick ass looking mic. We have not
Mhm.
spoken about a very important person that together with you makes this business tick. Let's give her some airtime. Tell us,
Oh yes.
I'm fascinated because I mean, if I look at myself and Lynette, and yes, you know, when you married, you start um, adapting and you start taking on new passions. I mean, dogs never was my part of my thing, and you know, now I'm hooked. And Bubblegum's the one who will choose me at nighttime to come and lie down or snuggle next to. I guarantee you, not Lynette, me, right? um,
Yeah.
how I'm fascinated about, you know, it's so easy for Sanita to say, you know what, this is your thing, I'm gonna do my thing. And it's so wonderful to see her being so heavily involved, you know, in the business. And it is really authentic, you know, it's not a facade. I know that she enjoys it as well. And what's been the recipe for that? Has she been always in tune with animals, or have you done a real good job in converting her?
Let's put to bed this rest that we can convert a woman. That is an impossible task. I don't want them to, but we will always be at their beck and call. It's just that sometimes we let them believe we are in charge, and let us be very honest. It's if you want to stay alive and live a fruitful life, salute your woman. All right. Having said that, I've been blessed. Sanita has own female inclinations. I mean, all women love dressing and fashion and music and cooking and children and all of that. And so she has her own balance in life that she chooses, but she certainly is an animal lover, and I'm thankful for that because it clicked with us from the start. And she met me as an animal lover. In fact, she probably saw certain animal characteristics in me that she was attracted to. I wish I knew that. Right? That's quite likely. And
That's for
it
another show, eh? Not this show.
um, I'm talking about the capacity of an animal to love. That's what I'm referring to. I don't know what you were thinking about just now. There is nothing like a dog's ability to exude love, and you will find that now. It's simply magical. But anyway, I'm getting philosophical there now. I think Sanita has been passionate about animals all the way, and whether they were animals that we owned and then slowly developed into a business, so much so that she also quit her job as a school teacher of many years and decided to bow out and join the business. And of course, her involvement in the business is everything, because she has that way with customers and clients that I fail in, and she is able to interact and develop the business and develop relationships that it's quite astounding. Then, of course, her innate uh, passion for control, I'm talking about business control, is there, so that the business runs well. It runs as a business. There's always a compassionate side to it, which she brings in, whether we are dealing with customers that have difficulty and so on, and have other challenges.
Yeah.
Because with us, the pet always comes first. And then I think she drives a great deal of love into this business. And so it has grown in that respect. I certainly can't do without her input. She's extremely creative and very supportive of my ideas. I have some ambitious plans all the time, and not all of them are realistic. Some are so grandiose. I wish I could own a property that's large enough, not only for the business, but to keep certain, like, rescue animals and so on. It's just a grand dream,
Yeah.
but it just hasn't happened. That's God's will. So she brings a lot of balance to my life in terms of the business.
No,
Sure.
that's wonderful. And that is the recipe for your success. So just before we close, I just want to, for those that are interested in contacting Segrin, it's classypetcare.co.za. And Segrin, they can contact you on, do you want to just repeat the email address if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you could use my private email address. It's Sagren, SAGREN 30 at gmail.com. Sagren30 at gmail.com.
Okay. So we're going to be wrapping up, and I think just some final thoughts from my side. Kaz, it was such a pleasure talking to you, and I'm really
Likewise.
pleased the way the episode went. I don't believe we really need to edit much. Um, I feel justified in the choice of pitching to you to join me on this podcast, and I've had so much of insights from this, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed it as well. I just want to give you credit for firstly being a maverick of sorts, and taking the plunge of doing it on your own, and going for your passion and throwing your energy towards your passion into this business that you've developed over the years. And congratulations on that. It's not about how much of money, whether it's made you a millionaire. It's, you are clearly happy, and I
Yes.
can see it.
Thank you, because I tell you what, if I become just half the man that my dog thinks I am, I'll achieve a legacy. I think That's all I want to live up to. It's amazing what our dogs think we are.
Thanks so much, Segrin. Um,
Yeah.
so that brings an end to this week's episode of Addicted to Creating. Today, we got into the creative brain of Segrin Naya, who is passionate about his dogs and passionate about animals. And please go to his website, classypetcare.co.za, get in contact with him, network, learn, and become a pet owner. You too can become a Surrean someday. Nah,
A responsible.
jokes aside. I mean, again, Lynette's constantly laughing about it. I never thought I'd be able to kind of open my heart to dogs. And it's strange though that the first instance that I knew I was starting to change was Lynette's dog in Durban, was a Belgian Shepherd, and I started bonding with that guy, and his name was Brett. And I think from that point, there was something about his temperament that was just so amazing. Because Belgian Shepherd, I was like, whoa, was like a German Shepherd, I should be afraid or whatever. But I actually started playing around for the first time with a large enough dog, and his temperament was just magical. Clearly, we had met in previous lifetimes, so he was very
Who
comfortable with
knows?
me, and
Mhm.
that made me quite comfortable. But still, I still held back for a couple more years, and then finally, yeah, bubblegum arrived, and it's been fantastic, and it's added a new level of compassion as a human being. And you there's almost like a new dimension to yourself,
Absolutely.
and then it goes on to your kids as well, because your kids
Yes.
also start becoming very responsible. They also start being much more aware about not just animals, about the general environment that the animals are in as well.
Hmm. Yes.
So Segrin, again, thanks so much for this call. I really look forward to catching up with you soon, hopefully in person. We keep saying
Yes.
this, and I am confident COVID is kind of winding down now. So I'm looking forward to
Yes.
catching up with you in person, and all the very best. And to all the doggies in the backyard. They've been very quiet. You got some sort of noise suppression thing that's really working well there. I've heard no barks.
They've just all been trained to sit and wait until we are finished.
That is how good this guy is.
Well,
Bye.
yes, to responsible ownership, responsible pet ownership, and you know, be the person your dog thinks you are. That's all.
That's wonderful party words.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Segrin. And to our listeners,
Thank
have
you.
a fantastic evening, morning, middle of the night, whatever time of day that you're listening to this. And yeah, I hope you've got some great insights out of it, and we'll talk to you soon. Addicted to Creating.